G'day, Macca here.
Stuart here.
Paul here.
Paul Truscott joining us, ran unopposed for Division 3.
Macca, we did talk about where we're going to be today. It's pretty exciting. We're not in Wuku, we're somewhere else.
No, we are right over here, chiefly placed, Freedom of Expression Park. Is it a park, Paul?
It's still called the Town Hall Green, but yeah, and right next to our magnificent City Hall, of course.
And
so we're in Maryborough.
We don't know what's going to happen. So if you hear noises, crazy things go on, we're outdoors. Bells. There will be bells. Yes, very soon.
Yeah, when will the bells sound?
About 3 minutes.
In about 4 minutes, yeah.
So that gives us, so we've got to finish within 3 minutes. That's going to be a quick episode today.
Absolutely. You did want to get to something before we kick off today.
Yes, absolutely. It is a very sad day for the Fraser Coast, for Hervey Bay, for Maryborough, for our community. One of the heroes of our community died yesterday afternoon, Norm McLean. There is no question that if you were to measure him against anyone, he would be on the mountaintop. He is an absolute legend, someone I admired, I looked up to. He was very kind to me. He supported me through a lot of difficult times and a lot of good times. He was there for my family. He loved my wife. He loved my kids. He always greeted me with a smile and a word of encouragement. And I always left him knowing that it was going to be okay. He raised his own family in Queensland, well, started in Melbourne, and then he moved up to Queensland, created the Susan River Homestead. And then from there, he built his family, a beautiful family. His beautiful children raised here have gone on to do incredible things, and he's proud of every single one of them. When he talked about his kids, man, he just smiled. He was so proud. There was no pretense about Norm. He was very passionate about his family and about his community. And today it just feels like the sun's not shining as brightly, but I promise you that the Fraser Coast is a much better place because of him, not just in tourism, but our community is better because of him and what he gave to so many people. And there'll be so many people this morning that will be reflecting on what Norm gave to them in quiet, looking after them and just caring for them. The guy is a hero and he will be truly, truly missed. And my heart goes out to his family and those who truly loved him.
Can I just add to that too as well briefly that Norm's an icon in the Fraser Coast, and he's the kind of bloke where I had similar interactions with him as yourself. Obviously you've had a lot more, but every interaction I had with Norm was positive. And I think that's something that is getting rare these days. And I think that's really just noteworthy about his character, of how gentlemanly he was and how well respected he was. And it's great to have that positive influence in people's lives, and he will be missed.
Definitely a person that won't be forgotten. Let's get into it, Stuart.
Yeah.
Hervey Bay Chamber Meet the Candidates. You were there on Thursday night.
Yeah, I was there. I think in total there would have been about 100 people that attended, and 20-something candidates. Paul, you attended as well?
Yeah, I went along and watched. It was interesting, I think is one word to describe the night, yeah. Yeah,
look, from my perspective, what I was disappointed about, but completely understood the structure, is that you only got to see one division because all the divisions broke up after the mayoral campaign, so a mayoral debate. So you had the mayoral debate, which was a number of questions asked between each candidate, and they got to make a 5-minute statement and answer a couple of questions that they'd already been given the questions before they came.
Okay, yeah.
So they had an opportunity to prepare for that, as did all the candidates. From there, all the other divisions spoke in different rooms. So then they broke up and the crowd then dispersed. So for example, in Division 6, you only had 13 people at the event with 6 candidates. It was almost 2 for each one. And then some of those weren't even, they didn't live in the division.
Okay.
So from that perspective, it was a bit disappointing. I would have liked to have heard more from the other candidates. It was probably disappointing as well for Division 5. Michelle Govers. I change it every week.
I've seen it on the podcast. It changes every time.
So you reckon it's Michelle Govers? We're locking Michelle Govers was the only candidate that turned up for that debate. Suarez didn't, which meant that they got to hear from one person but not the other. And I think that's a bit disappointing for people who turn up. I think it would have been good to see Suarez come. But the mayoral debate, look, there's no real easy way to say it was a farce.
Yeah, okay. I had something about DeAmalgamation coming up.
Yeah, and look, I understand the angst that DeAmalgamation caused in 2008, the issues that were raised in 2007 before the decision was made. But we're talking about 16 years ago that DeAmalgamation or amalgamation occurred. To be talking about that as your key issue, because there was no other issue that Grant Reynolds raised. So Grant Reynolds raised the fact that DeAmalgamation would be what he would be pushing for if he got elected as mayor. He said, and these are his words,
if I have anything to say at Maryborough on Thursday night, it's because I can say I would strongly suggest DeAmalgamation if you can, and take Tyro with you.
To me, that is such a backward step, because firstly, if you're blaming DeAmalgamation on your issues, there's a real problem.
I agree absolutely with what you were saying. I thought it was a silly point to bring up about DeAmalgamation. As you said, 16 years after it happened. Just silly. There was one of the questions that was asked of the mayors too about the competition between Maryborough and Hervey Bay. And I personally think that's a bit of a silly point as well. I think we need to stop looking at it as competition between the two and start seeing it as what's good for one area can be good for another. And what's good for that area can be good for another area as well. We need to start working collectively, not competitively, and working towards a better future for the whole region.
We need to recognise and celebrate the uniqueness of Maryborough and Hervey Bay, and much, much more. There's a lot more to the Fraser Coast than the two cities.
One of the things that isn't great for democracy is that you've got one guy who's clearly going to take it out, right? So why aren't we getting better candidates for mayor?
Every elected official, except for Paul obviously, should have to vie for their job every 4 years. Not because they're not good at it, but because it makes them better at it. So if George had a really tough candidate and he had to really articulate his message and his vision, that's what he had to do this time, it would make him a better mayor. And he knows that. Right now, he has to, I guess, invest in an election that is a little bit of a waste of time for everyone involved, because there is no way that Grant Reynolds is going to be able to prosecute the arguments that need to be prosecuted against the mayor and challenge him on those really important issues. If you want to run and be part of democracy, if you want to be engaged in the democratic process, don't restrict yourself from doing it simply because you think you may lose. Because it's not only about winning or losing, it's about the voice that you have during that election process. And I guess that's what upsets me about the mayoral race, is that there's one voice in this race. And it's not right, because we've got somebody who just hasn't done their homework, isn't ready for this, isn't invested in it, isn't spending money, isn't engaged in the true issues, or has an understanding in any way. And Grant Reynolds might be a lovely bloke, but he decided to run for the top position on the Fraser Coast Regional Council. And so he has to be held to account as to why he's doing it. Maybe he should have run as a councillor first before he made the decision to run for mayor, because while his grandfather may have been mayor, he clearly has no idea what the position entails.
Okay, so I want to talk about signage. Went out and about today to check signage around Maryborough. Was surprised there wasn't a lot coming into town.
You mean along towards Hervey Bay from...
That's Division 3.
That's so Division 3.
That's why there's no signage.
You went and cleaned them up.
I fortunately didn't have to put any out. So I actually had one resident call me upset that I hadn't put any signs out. So that was I got to politely explain, well, thankfully there's no need this time.
So the mystery is solved.
The mystery is solved there. But even around town, I think
you can see some just over there.
Yeah, the two Daniels are giving it a red hot go.
I think what you're saying is that Hervey Bay has a lot more signage than Maryborough.
Hervey Bay's got a lot more signage. Michelle's given it a red hot go here as well, though.
Michelle Byrne? Yeah. Division 1?
Yeah. So when you go out towards Maryborough West...
When you consider in Maryborough, for the councillor side of it, there's a collective 7 councillors running for the 3 divisions, whereas you've got 6 candidates running for 1 division in Hervey Bay. So just by those numbers alone, there's going to be a whole lot less
Yeah.
signage across the
definitely.
southern region of the Fraser Coast.
Stuart went out and about, and I took some video of the signage that I could find this morning driving around the Maryborough region. Just as you get into Maryborough, at the Food Works here, we've got Daniel Beattie and Daniel Sanderson. Not a lot in Granville. Daniel Sanderson and Daniel Beattie. At the busy intersection here with Stockland across the road, and just here at Super Cheap, we've got Beattie and Sanderson. Maryborough West. Optional preferential voting. Stuart, you can just put one if you want, can't you?
Yeah, with state elections,
Yeah.
it's mandatory preferential voting.
Yes.
So if there's 6 candidates, you have to put 1 through to 6
Okay.
of your choice. In a local government election,
Yep.
it's one or the other. For example, Ipswich has first past the post,
Yep.
which means that you vote for somebody, and whoever has got the most, they're elected. So if there's 3 of us and I get 10 votes, you get 8 votes, and you get 8 votes, then I win. There's no preferences drop. With the Fraser Coast, it's optional, so you don't have to. Preferential voting. So you can do one thing. If there's 6 people, you can vote 1.
Okay.
You can vote 1 and 2. You can vote 1, 2, and 3, or you can vote 1 through to 6.
Okay.
And it's your choice. Now, a candidate can then provide a how to vote card outlining whether or not they want 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, and 3. But regardless of what they put, if they hand you a card and say, this is how we think you should vote, it's up to the voter. They
And this
decide.
can be a bad thing for the candidate as well, because someone's going, oh, you've got some backdoor deals going on. You've had that before, right?
Yeah, I think the last election I ran, I got really attacked because in state elections, you have to have preferential voting, mandatory preferential voting. So you have to mark every box. So when you do a how to vote card, which you need to give somebody to make a decision, you have to choose a 1, a 2, a 3. Obviously, you hope you choose yourself as 1, or else it doesn't make sense. But you have to make a decision. And you usually make that decision based on who you think is going to come last, and try and do a preference with them, so that you want them to preference you before somebody else. Because say for example, we've got 5 people in a race, the person who polls last ends up getting, they're cut out of the election or out of the vote, and their second preference is then distributed amongst the remaining candidates. And then the next person is cut and their preferences are distributed until it comes to somebody who passes that magical 50%. And Paul, in 2012, you had a great experience. I don't know if it was great.
I don't know if I'd call it great, but
you had optional preferential voting.
yeah.
And after all the other candidates were excluded, there was 2 left. There was you and there was Chris Loft. And Chris Loft won by how many votes?
2
votes.
2 votes at the time. I got in touch with the director of the ECQ at the time and said, can I ask for a recount, please? Because that's obviously very close. And they told me that no, they would not do a recount because it had already taken a few weeks to get to that point and they needed to declare the seat, which I thought was a bit off, but it's a long time ago now.
But it was a second, there was 2 recounts, wasn't there? There was 1.
Well, there was 1 beforehand, and because it originally was like 6 votes separate, and then the next vote was 2, which is where they finished at. And I'm like, you should get to the same number twice to go, no, we've got the same number twice.
That's
fair
a legitimate
enough.
question.
But where it has changed, I'm like, nah, that's not cool. If you get the same number twice, it could have changed and gone backwards. I don't know. But I'm like, I always thought that was a bit rough, that they wouldn't do a recount because they'd said it had taken too long.
From my perspective, it is an example of preferential voting because you didn't finish second, did you?
No, I actually finished 3rd originally. So
on
it was
the
only,
first count,
yeah.
on first preferences, you finished 3rd with about 1,200 votes, was it?
I had a bit just under 1,200, and Julie Arthur, who was the incumbent at the time, had just over 1,200.
I was going to say that, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, you knew I was going to say that.
That's right.
And Chris Loft was sitting at the top.
He was at the top.
You had 8 candidates running, and every time that the bottom candidate got washed away or got cut out, it would change ever so slightly.
Yeah.
Now, here's an interesting thing. You just beat Julie Arthur in that second spot on the last person that was cut.
Correct.
did you realise that if you had just gone underneath Julie Arthur,
Yeah, that's right.
she would have won.
She would have, yeah.
Because if you had come third,
Yeah,
Julie Arthur would have been in for another 4 years.
could well be.
That shows you, one, how important preferential voting is, but also from a candidate's perspective, it's a real challenge, because if you don't have to put somebody on your ballot as your second preference, then you shouldn't. But it also creates a situation that you're thinking about whether they're going to preference deal with somebody else. But what I would say is, whatever you decide as a candidate, do it with caution, because there's risks associated with both. If everyone else in the race isn't preferencing and you're just preferencing two people are preferencing each other, your voters are very intelligent and they don't like it. They find it really offensive. They think there's some sort of coercion or collaboration going on.
I did have vote cards in the 2012 election, but I chose not to. I found them waste of money, waste of paper, waste of everything. I'm like, people are smart enough to know who they want to vote for, and I told that to them.
How much money did this guy save this year? Honestly, not having to do anything. There you go. But congratulations again, Paul. We're going to run through quickly front runners, who you think at the moment.
I have very similar to last week, but I have made a change.
Okay.
So George Seymour is still going to be the mayor, particularly after...
Definitely.
Look, I'm wondering if Grant Reynolds will get 100 votes. Yeah.
You never know. Like, I always think there's always the opposition to the incumbent, whoever it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
And so it'll be interesting to see that. Like, I know there's the Paul haters, there's the Daniel haters, there's the whoever haters. There's always going to be those people that just don't like the incumbent, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah. Should we keep going? I'll go through front runners before the clock finishes. What do you reckon?
Yep, go.
Okay, so George Seymour, Michelle Burns still in Division 1, Phil Truscott, a relative of yours, Paul, in Division 2. Then you got Paul Truscott, who's unopposed, Daniel Sanderson, Michelle Govers, Robert Garland, Division 7. I think after the feedback I got this week and sort of looking at some of the trends on social media, it looks as though John Wayland is starting to really build some momentum. I think that this is going to be the closest race with Andrew Broad, John Wayland, and Jan Heggie, and the Animal Justice Party candidate, who I can't remember at the moment. But at the moment, this week, I think John's just nudged ahead. Well, let's see what happens in the next 22 days, because I think that's going to be an exciting space. Dennis Chapman, Sarah Farage, and Rolf Light. Looking at that, what do you think of that list?
I think that you have the majority correct. I don't know if I would agree with all of them, but the ones that I'm not sure of, I'll save you the time, is I probably shouldn't say, because I've got to work with these people.
Yeah, are you allowed to say anything?
I'm
or
sure
is it a good idea for you to?
allowed to, but I don't know if it's a good idea.
Hang on,
Okay.
CEO.
Let's check 150, prescribed conflict.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. He said it's on you.
Yeah.
He said you can. So rather, how many have I got, in your opinion, do you reckon are too close to call? Or
I reckon there's maybe one or two that I'm not sure of there. Out of your front runners, one or two.
And you have to guess at home.
Well, it can only be Division 7 and Division 10 that you're unsure of.
Well, we'll just wait and see. I'll let you know after the 16th of March. So.
Actually, write them down on a piece of paper and then put them in an envelope, and we're not allowed to look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, he won't do that, because what if he's wrong? He's still going to work with them for 4 years.
There is. Hey, look, it's been great being up here in Maryborough today, and thank you to everyone for having us here, which has been awesome.
I just want to ask you one question, Paul.
Sure.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
What advice would you give to candidates that are running in this election or any future elections?
For the first-time candidates?
Yeah, first time.
I would think that one of the most important things you can do is build a profile before you announce your candidacy. Is one of the most important things, to be connected and in the community beforehand. I think people that use the election as a platform to build their profile is not a good start. Personally, that's my opinion. I think you need to be connected, and the community needs to know who you are. It's really important that they can put a face to the name, know what you stand for, and not just use the month before an election to do that.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Maryborough, for having us.
Thank you.
Shout out to Wuku.
And Pink. Remember Pink?
No, I'm trying to forget.